Don't eat that, mister. The man in the blue jacket put something in your coffee. The words were so quiet that Elliot Crane almost didn't hear them. He had been standing at the edge of the courthouse steps, briefcase in one hand, coffee cup in the other, watching his assistant flag down a cab through the gray October drizzle. He turned slowly, expecting to find a child tugging at the sleeve of the wrong adult, the way children sometimes latched onto strangers in crowds, mistaking them for someone they knew. But the girl was looking directly at him. She was small, 7, maybe 8 years old. Her dark braids had come partially undone on one side, the rubber band hanging loose near her ear. She wore a red windbreaker, 2 sizes too large, the sleeves rolled back at the wrists, and canvas shoes that were soaked through at the toes. She was not crying. She was not frightened. She was watching him with the kind of stillness that did not belong to it, standing alone in the rain outside the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. Elliot Crane had spent 31 years practicing corporate law. He had cross-examined witnesses who sweated through their collars. He had sat across from executives who lied smoothly and often. He knew what evasion looked like, what fear looked like, what someone trying to appear calm while their hands shook looked like. This girl looked like none of those things. She looked like someone who had decided to say something difficult and had already accepted the consequences of saying it. He lowered the coffee cup. "What did you say?" he asked. She pointed at the cup. "He put something in it. When you were talking to the other man in the big coat." He reached over and dropped something in, a little white thing. Small. Elliot looked at the cup. The coffee was dark, almost black, the way he always ordered it. There was nothing visible floating on the surface. He looked back at the girl. "Where is this man now?" He walked back up the steps, into the building. She paused. He had a blue jacket, like a sports jacket, but nicer. He had a silver pin on the left side, and he was wearing brown leather shoes, the kind with the little holes in the pattern. Elliot set the cup down carefully on the stone ledge beside him. His assistant, Nora Bledsoe, had spotted him from the bottom of the steps and was making her way back up through the crowd, frowning at the delay. "What's your name?" he asked the girl. Britta. I'm Elliot. Are you here with someone?" She shook her head. "My Nana is inside. She had a hearing today. For her benefits." She said the word benefits with the careful pronunciation of someone who has heard it used by adults in serious conversations for a long time. "She told me to wait outside, but the rain started, and I came under the roof part." Elliot crouched down so they were closer to the same height. He was 63 years old and his knees reminded him of this, but he stayed low. "This man you saw, did you hear him say anything? On a phone, or to someone near him?" Britta thought about it. Not in the performative way children sometimes pretended to think, tilting their heads for effect. She looked at a specific point on the ground as though she were rewinding something. "He was on his phone before," he said. She paused again, recalibrating. He said, "It's done. The meeting is handled." And then he hung up and walked over and did it. Nora reached them. She glanced at the girl, then at Elliot, then at the coffee cup sitting on the ledge. "Mr. Crane, the car is waiting. You have the 4:30. "Cancel it," Elliot said. Nora looked at him. "Cancel the 4:30 and call Diedrich. Tell him I need him at the south entrance in 10 minutes. He straightened up, knees complaining. He looked at Britta. "Diedrich is my head of security. He's a good man. He's going to want to ask you some questions. Is that all right?" Britta looked at him steadily. "Is he going to think I made it up?" "No," Elliot said. "He's not." She considered this. "Okay." Elliot did not touch the coffee cup again. He asked Nora to find a building security officer and have the cup handled carefully, without drawing attention, without anyone touching the rim or the interior. Then he led Britta to a dry bench just inside the courthouse lobby and sat beside her. There were people moving through in every direction, lawyers with rolling cases, clerks with folders under their arms, a pair of police officers at the far entrance, pigeons strutting along the transom windows 3 floors up. Ordinary things. The afternoon proceeding as it always did. He had been 3 steps from drinking that coffee. "Tell me again," he said to Britta. "Everything you saw from the beginning." She told him. She had been standing near the pillar at the top of the steps, under the stone overhang where the rain didn't reach. She had been watching people because there was nothing else to do, and her Nana had said hearing would take a long time. The man in the blue jacket had come out of the building at approximately. She didn't say approximately. She said around 2:30. She remembered the time because she had checked the clock above the main doors when the rain started. He had stood near Elliot's group for a few minutes, not speaking to anyone, looking at his phone. Elliot had been talking to the man in the big overcoat. This would be Jeffrey Waite, his co-counsel. About something. Probably about the case. She didn't know. She wasn't listening to them. and then Elliot had turned slightly, and Jeffrey had pointed at something on the street, and the man in the blue jacket had leaned in and tipped something from his closed fist into the cup that Elliot had set down on the ledge for a moment while he turned. 1 second. Maybe 2. And you're sure it was my cup? Elliot said. Not a challenge. He needed to be sure she understood the question. There was only one cup, Britta said. Yours, in the dark paper sleeve. The other man didn't have one. Diedrich Voss arrived at 8 minutes past the half hour. He was a large, quiet man with a gray beard and the kind of face that had learned not to react to things before it needed to. He listened to Britta without interrupting. He asked her 3 follow-up questions about the silver pin. Did she know what shape it was, what size, what it reminded her of? And she said it was round, maybe the size of a dime, and it had some kind of bird on it. Wings open, she thought. He photographed the coffee cup where it stood on the ledge, already bagged in clear plastic by the security officer, and made 2 phone calls in quick succession before turning back to Elliot. I have the entrance camera footage being pulled, he said. 2:20 to 2:45. We'll have it in the next hour. Then more quietly, you should know, we've had a threat advisory flagged on your name since last week. I was going to brief you after today's verdict. Elliot looked at him. Since last week. I didn't want to alarm you before the decision. The decision came down this morning, Diedrich. I know. Diedrich did not look away. I'm sorry. Elliot was quiet for a moment. Then he turned back to Britta, who was watching both of them with the same composed attention she had given everything else. He understood, with the particular clarity that sometimes arrives after a shock has passed through the body and left it strangely calm, that he was alive because an 8-year-old girl had been standing in the right place and had chosen to speak. She could have decided it was not her business. She could have convinced herself she had misread what she saw. She could have been afraid of being wrong, or afraid of being ignored, or simply afraid. Children were ignored constantly by adults in a hurry. She would have had every reason to expect the same. Instead, she had walked up to a stranger in a suit outside a courthouse and told him the truth. Britta, he said, is your Nana still inside? She should be done soon. Her name's on the schedule for 3 o'clock. What's her name? Lorraine Tapper. Can I wait with you? Until she comes out? Britta looked at him. It seemed to be a slightly surprising offer, but not an unwelcome one. Okay, she said. They waited on the lobby bench. Nora brought a hot chocolate from the cafe on the 2nd floor without being asked, and Britta accepted it with both hands and a thank you that was polite enough to suggest she had been raised to say it and meant it. Elliot drank water from a bottle someone had found. He was not thirsty, but he needed to do something with his hands. He thought about the case. 31 years of corporate litigation, and this verdict in favor of a pension fund class action against a manufacturing company that had knowingly misrepresented its liability exposure was the one that would matter most when he looked back on it. 412 workers. Some of them had already died waiting. He had thought, stepping out of the courtroom this morning, that the worst of it was over. He had not thought about what might come after for him. The man in the blue jacket had not been in the courtroom. Elliot was certain of that. He had memorized every face on the opposing side over 3 weeks of hearings, the way he always did, which meant whoever sent the man had access to his public schedule. The courthouse appearance was no secret, and had planned this calmly in advance, knowing that Elliot would be standing on those steps at that particular time with his particular habit of ordering coffee from the cart on Wellington Street and holding it while he talked. Someone knew his habits. Diedrich had already begun working through that question before Elliot finished forming it. At 3:17, a small woman in a beige cardigan and dark slacks came through the interior doors of the lobby, moving slowly with one hand on the wall for balance. She was in her mid-70s, perhaps, with silver hair pinned back and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead in the way people do when they've forgotten they're there. She saw Britta on the bench, and her face did what faces do when a person has been worried about something and has been trying not to show it for an hour and a half, and then the thing they were worried about turns out to be fine. There you are, Lorraine Tapper said. Britta stood up. I stayed dry, Nana. I see that. Lorraine's eyes moved to Elliot, calm and measuring, the way older women who have been through enough tend to look at strangers sitting next to their grandchildren. Elliot stood. Mrs. Tapper, my name is Elliot Crane. Your granddaughter did something today that I'm not going to forget for the rest of my life. I'd like to speak with you, if you have a moment. Lorraine Tapper looked at him for a long second. Then she looked at Britta. Did you do something good or something bad? Good, Britta said. I think. She did something extraordinarily good, Elliot said. Lorraine sat down on the bench. She sat the way people sit when their feet hurt and the day has been longer than they expected. Elliot sat across from them on a chair he pulled from beside the information desk and told her what Britta had seen. He kept his voice level and did not dramatize. He had explained difficult things to people many times, and he knew that clarity was kinder than softening. When he finished, Lorraine was quiet for a moment. She was not looking at him. She was looking at Britta with an expression that was not surprise exactly, more like recognition, as though she were seeing something she had long suspected confirmed. She notices everything, Lorraine said. Always has. Since she was 3, used to describe people's shoes in the grocery store, the color, the brand, whether they were tied right. She shook her head slightly. I always said it would matter one day. It mattered today, Elliot said. There was a pause. Lorraine folded her hands in her lap. How is your case? Your hearing, the benefits claim. How did it go? Elliot hadn't known what her hearing was for. He felt the information land somewhere in his chest. He glanced at Nora, who had been standing at a discreet distance throughout and was already looking at him with the expression she used when she knew what he was up to axe and was determining whether it was logistically possible. He gave her the smallest nod. If you'll allow me, Elliot said to Lorraine, I'd like to have my office look into your file. I'm not promising anything I can't deliver, but I know people in that system, and I know where claims get held up, and why. It costs you nothing, and it may help move things along. Lorraine looked at him with the kind of measured dignity that comes not from indifference, but from having been disappointed enough times to protect herself from hope before it was warranted. We've been waiting 7 months, she said. My late husband's pension claim. They keep asking for the same forms. That's a processing delay. It's common and it's fixable. He paused. May I try? She held his gaze for another moment. Then she nodded once. The camera footage came back at 4:40. The man in the blue jacket was identifiable from the second angle. The one mounted above the main entrance pointed toward the steps. The silver pin was visible even at that resolution. Round, wingspan spread. Diedrich recognized it before the analyst finished enhancing the image. It was the insignia of a private club whose membership list overlapped considerably with the board of directors of the company Elliot had just defeated in court. The Toronto police took the case the following morning. The substance in the coffee cup was identified by the Center of Forensic Sciences within 48 hours. It was not something you would taste in dark coffee. It was not something that would have appeared immediately. By the time anyone connected the symptoms to anything other than a sudden cardiac event, Elliot Crane would have been home, or in a cab, or at his desk. There would have been no investigation. Or if there was, it would have begun too late. The man in the blue jacket, whose name, once the footage was matched against databases, turned out to be Terrence Odell, a private consultant with a history of working adjacent to people who could not afford to be directly associated with the things they wanted done, was arrested at Pearson International the following Tuesday. He had been booked on a flight to Zurich with a connecting ticket to somewhere the warrant could not easily follow. He was stopped at the gate. He did not look surprised. He had the look of a man who had calculated the odds and found them acceptable and had now revised his calculation. His employer, though, it took another 3 weeks and the cooperation of 2 financial regulators and a forensic accountant who had been waiting for exactly this kind of thread to pull, turned out to be a senior vice president at the manufacturing company whose stock value had collapsed the morning of the verdict. A man who had a great deal to lose and had decided, sometime in the week before sentencing, that the most direct path to protecting it was removing the lawyer who had built the case. Elliot was not particularly surprised. He had spent 31 years learning that the most dangerous people were not the ones who were openly cruel, but the ones who had convinced themselves they were reasonable. The pension claim for Lorraine Tapper was resolved in 11 days. It turned out to require not legal action, but single phone call from a paralegal in Elliot's office to a supervisor 2 levels above the caseworker who had been sitting on the file, combined with the resubmission of documents that had been received and then misrouted 4 months earlier. Lorraine did not make a large deal of this when Nora called to tell her. She said thank you. She said she was grateful, and she asked whether it would be all right to send something by way of thanks. Nora said it was absolutely not necessary. Lorraine said she understood that, but she was going to do it anyway. A tin of butter shortbread arrived at the office the following week, wrapped in a card that had a painted cardinal on the front. Inside, in steady, deliberate handwriting, Britta picked the card. She says cardinals mean someone is watching over you. I think she may be right. L. Tapper Elliot kept the card on his desk. He met Britta again in November on a Saturday when Nora arranged for both of them to be brought to the office for a tour. Britta wore a different windbreaker this time, green, the right size, and she looked at everything in the office with the same careful cataloging attention she had given to the courthouse steps. She asked about a photograph on the wall of Elliot, shaking hands with a very tall man in front of a building. She asked what the building was, and who the man was, and what the handshake was for. Elliot told her it was a children's legal aid clinic, and the man was the director, and the handshake was because they had just secured permanent funding for the next 5 years. "That's good," Britta said, still looking at the photograph. "It is," Elliot said. She turned around. She looked at him with the directness she had used outside the courthouse on a rainy afternoon when she had every reason not to say anything. "Do they help kids there? The legal aid place?" "They help families," Elliot said. "Adults and children both. People who can't pay for a lawyer but need one." Britta nodded slowly. The information went somewhere inside her, filed neatly, the way she filed everything. Elliot asked if she had thought about what she wanted to do when she grew up. He knew it was an adult question that children were asked too often and with too much expectation in it, and he braced for the awkwardness of having asked it. Britta did not seem awkward about it. "I want to do what you do," she said. "The part where you help people who can't help themselves. Not the other parts. That's the best part," Elliot said. "It took me about 20 years to figure that out." She looked at him with the expression of someone making a private note to not take 20 years. Then she walked over to the window to look at the city below, and Lorraine, who had been sitting quietly in the armchair by the door with a cup of tea Nora had brought her, caught Elliot's eye and smiled. It was a small smile, not triumphant, not sentimental. The smile of a woman who had raised a child alone on very little, and had managed, somehow, to give that child something that could not be bought or planned or predicted. The steady, unself-conscious belief that what she saw was worth saying. Outside, the city moved through its ordinary November afternoon. The light was already going at 3 o'clock, the way it does in Ontario when November is settling in for the long stay. The CN Tower caught the last of it above the rooftops. Lorraine finished her tea. Britta pressed her palm flat against the glass and watched the cars below sort themselves through the intersection without being told to, each one following rules that held the whole thing together, every small part doing its part. And somewhere in a filing cabinet in a government office on Bay Street, a pension claim marked "Resolved" sat in a folder with a woman's name on it, and the 7-month wait that had preceded it was over, and the shortbread had already been eaten, and the cardinal card was on the desk, and the man who had tried to end something extraordinary on a courthouse step was answering questions in a room with fluorescent lights and no windows. Elliot watched Britta, watching the city. He thought about the coffee, about how close it had been, about the single ordinary moment, him turning to look at something Jeffrey pointed out. 2 seconds, maybe 3, that had made the whole thing possible, and the single extraordinary moment that had undone it. A small girl in a too large windbreaker deciding that what she had seen was worth the risk of being wrong. He had thanked her properly once, formally, with Lorraine present, and Nora taking notes on the legal matters. He had not managed to say the true thing, which was simpler than all of it. He said it now, quietly to the room rather than to her, not expecting her to hear. "You didn't have to." Britta turned from the window. She had heard. "I know," she said. "But you would have." She turned back to the glass. The light finished going. The city held.